The big data gathering, we can get the technology. But that human connection, only humans can do. And I think we're going to see a massive revolution in the nature of work.
How should we be preparing ourselves now?
We better do some self-development.
Blaire Palmer is a former news journalist, a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and one of the country's top leadership coaches. She's spent more than 2 decades provoking, challenging, guiding and encouraging senior executives and their teams as they navigate the challenge of leading in unprecedented times. What's your views on working from home?
I think that we have misunderstood what that's really for. So I think we have treated working from home like an employee perk. It's not a perk.
Blaire believes that new approaches and a different mindset are crucial in creating an organisation that's fit for the future.
We have a lot of distrust in the sources of information, whether those are sort of newspapers or online content, or whether it's people, our leaders. So we really are desperately thirsty for people that show up without a mask.
I'm Nicola Sands, and in this hugely insightful conversation, Blaire shares her thoughts on what it takes to be a leader in the digital age. Hi all, just before we start, I've got a very quick favour to ask. If you do enjoy this episode and the content on this channel, please could you hit the subscribe button? It really helps us to grow, to keep the conversations going, and we want to make this podcast better and better as we go along. Let's dive in. Blaire, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming in today. Now, you are one of the UK's, as we said in the introduction, leading business coaches. So what actually led you to this point? Because you weren't always a business coach, were you?
No, I don't think it even existed when I was thinking about what to do when I grew up. So I started my career as a journalist. I was a producer on the Today programme on Radio 4 back in the 90s. And I'd always wanted to be a broadcaster. I'd always wanted to be famous, probably. But when I worked at the BBC, I just felt this isn't what I want. The culture there, the nature of the work, the hours. And I just started to think, surely there's something else.
How long were you at the BBC for?
I was about 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, quite a while.
Yes, it was a proper career. But, you get to a certain point where you're thinking, I can change program, I can change location, but the job's still going to be the same. The culture's still really going to be the same. And I realised it wasn't for me. So I was searching for interesting human interest stories. And I read a story about a life coach. And I thought, well, she'd be great to have on the show. So we did an interview with her and we did a whole story about this growing career of coaching. And I realised I want to do that. So she became my coach. And within 12 months, I'd left the BBC and I was running my own coaching business.
And it's very true what you say. Back in the 90s, it wasn't really a job, a life coach. You didn't really hear of those things.
No. I mean, they might have existed, but I think there was this massive increase in that at that time, and a lot of new universities teaching it and accreditation bodies. And it just, I was one of the first 20 accredited coaches in Europe. It was that early, about 2000. And obviously it's everywhere now. Everybody is a coach now. Yeah.
So what was it, when you met this lady who was the life coach, what did she say to you? How did she make you see that this was the path for you?
Well, I listened to the way that she asked questions, the way she helped me think for myself. And it reminded me, when I'd been at university, I volunteered for a service called Nightline, which was a student counselling service, and we were trained by the Samaritans. And I just took to that. And, at the age of sort of 18, 19 years old, to be taught about asking open questions, to be taught that the answers lie in the other person, that you're not supposed to solve it for them, they're going to come up with the answers. So I had that almost in my DNA from when I was 18. And when I started working with her, I thought, this is what I learned. 10, 12 years ago. And I started to think, well, okay, I'm only 30, but maybe it's time for a career change. Maybe I could start my own business, and maybe I could do what she does. And she felt pretty confident that I could. So I did.
And how do you feel like your journalism training and your background as a journalist has helped you with what you do now, working with, leaders and big organisations?
So a joke that I make about it is that as a journalist, you ask questions for evil. And as a coach, you ask questions for good. So it's the same skill in a way, but for a different end. But more than that, I think when you're working with business people, particularly those that are in really intense competitive environments, they need to be able to take you seriously. And if you've come through what they perceive as a kind of wishy-washy, soft and fluffy background history, it's harder. It shouldn't be, but it is harder to prove that you deserve to be sitting opposite them. When you've been a BBC journalist and you've operated in a very macho, competitive, dangerous environment in a sense, with real heavy news stories, then I think they think, okay, I'll give this person 5 minutes and let them prove themselves. And if you can prove yourself in 5 minutes, then they trust you.
So what is the key thing that you do then, Blaire, to help leaders? I mean, how do you decide what help they need, and how do you find your clients?
Yeah. So the people I work with are inevitably quite enlightened because they see that there's an opportunity for them to continue to grow, even though they've been successful, even though they've achieved, huge seniority in their organization, or they've made a lot of money. One of the reasons that they've been able to do that is because they understand they don't have all the answers and that they have to keep evolving and growing. So in a way, they're already halfway there because there's an appetite for growth. But then what I'm asking them, coaching's all about creating attention. Where are you now and where do you want to be? And it's almost an elastic tension between those two things. And if where you are now is not where you want to be, then we can do some work together. So what we're trying to establish is, what are those two things? And there might be milestones in the way. We also want to establish, is that what you really want? Or is it just what you think you want? So there's a bit of digging around inside to find out what they really want as opposed to what they think they should want, or what the younger version of themselves thought success was. And then we start to chart a journey. But interestingly, the main barrier to them achieving that is their own inner world, their own inner thoughts, their beliefs about themselves and the world, the limits they put on themselves, their internal dialogue. It's almost all inner stuff, and that's what we're working on together.
And what are the typical challenges then, Blaire, that leaders will come to you with? I suppose when they're at the top of the tree, they have to be careful who they tell those insecurities to.
Yeah, there's very few people, it shouldn't be this way, but there's very few people that they can really be really open and vulnerable with. Because in order to work something through, you need to be brutally honest. And sometimes it's not pleasant. What you think about yourself or what you think about other people doesn't always sound, you wouldn't want your people to hear you work through that. And you might not want colleagues to know that it's a weakness for you, or, there's all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't want to share it. I think if I think about what most of my clients, most of them are having a leadership challenge. So they have a bold ambition, or the organization that they're leading has bold ambitions, and they need to take people on that journey. And for whatever reason, not everything that they're doing is effective. And they don't know why. So it might have worked in the past, but it's not working now, or the challenge is just so much bigger that what they used to do, which used to work, won't work in these circumstances. Or more likely, the times have changed and the pace of change has picked up. And so what would have worked in the past isn't going to work now. So it's not like they don't have any skill. It's just they're noticing, I'm going to need to do something differently because what has always worked for me isn't working anymore.
I mean, the world is changing such a lot. Where you write about this in your book, actually, Punks in Suits, about the technological revolution that's happening right now. And so, as you say, the way people led in the past has to be different now.
Yeah.
So, do you think people have actually caught on to that
No.
enough, sufficiently?
No, I think we're still operating by industrial age ideas, really. And it's a sort of dressed up version of that where we do care about engagement and we do care that people are motivated and we want them to step up and take ownership and responsibility and to use their initiative and to be creative and innovative. But the techniques we're using are based on some very old beliefs about people, which would have been fine in a factory setting. So
can you give me some examples of those?
Yeah. I mean, in the past, if you wanted, what you basically had humans doing is stuff that we very soon had machines to do. So if you just imagine someone on a production line, their job is to put these things into this box, right? And so you want to treat the people pretty much like machines because what you want them to do is predictable and efficient and productive, and you don't really want their humanity to come into work because that's going to get in the way.
Just all about productivity.
Yes. Today, we want our people to bring their humanity into work. We want them to care. We want them to go above and beyond. We want them to share their ideas. We want them to come up with solutions. We want a huge amount more from them. So we can't treat them like machines. And the techniques we have are good for the industrial age. So if I give you an example, if you want someone to change, all organizations want people to do things differently, right? Change is constant. So in the past, you would have said, here's the rationale. We currently produce this number of things and we need to produce that number of things. And in order to produce the new number, you're going to need to do this differently. And that was logic. And people were like, well, okay, just do it differently, right? Because I'm not invested in how we do it. I couldn't care. I just do the job for the money. Today, we're saying, here's where we are and here's where we want to be as a business. And that requires you being different. Well, you can't carrot and stick that. You can't just tell people, and you'll get a bonus if you do. You've actually got to tap into what motivates them at a deeper level, their sense of meaning and purpose. If you want them to care, you have to care about them. That's a whole different way of communicating, a whole different way of leading than we needed in the industrial past.
How can people make those changes? Do you think people recognise that?
I think they know that what they're doing isn't working. And I think that's why they turn to people like me, because, they just need some new approaches. I mean, the first thing is to unpick some of these beliefs. So a really pervading belief is that people in your organization are maybe trying to get away with something. And that therefore you need a lot of systems and processes and controls to stop them getting away with things. And when they make a request like, can I go home early, or can I work from home? If you believe that that's because people are fundamentally lazy and they're trying to get away with something, it's going to be really hard for you to connect with them or to think that they have value for your organization. If you switch your belief and think, okay, what if people, most of them, are not trying to get away with something? And so when they've said, can I leave early? It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're trying to get one past me. Then you become curious. How can I support you? What's happening? What's going on? How can we as a business support you? We've got a deadline. How would you like to handle that? And then the person says, well, actually, I do need to go home early, but I mean, I could come in early the next day. That would be absolutely fine. I'm not going to miss that deadline. And now you've got a completely different environment, a completely different culture.
And somebody who would be a lot more willing to go the extra mile for the business.
Yeah, you treat them like a human being. You believe, you trust, or you act as if you can't trust, you at least act act as if you're a person who trusts that most people aren't trying to get away with anything. And then you relate to them in that way. And it's amazing what you find out.
And, I think micromanaging was a big thing in the past as well. And there's nothing worse than having, I don't know, your boss breathing down your neck. Does that still happen a lot in organisations?
It does. And it happened a lot during the pandemic because we had been managing people by really watching them. The boss can see their people. And when people started working from home, it was really disempowering for bosses because, I can't see them. I don't know what they're doing. As it happened, people were, by and large, working really hard. In fact, a lot harder. A lot of businesses saw productivity go up during that time because people felt like, I have to prove that I'm working. And there's no commute or whatever. So I start earlier in the morning and I work later at night and my computer's right here in my house and there's nothing to stop me working. So that should have changed minds. But I think what's happened is we've come out of the pandemic and those boss type leaders have said, right, everybody back in the office where I can see you.
What's your views on working from home?
I think that we have misunderstood what that's really for. So I think we have treated working from home like an employee perk. It's not a perk. And that's because we've misunderstood what it's for. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to create an environment where people can do their best work. So the question of where you sit when you're doing it is pretty irrelevant. What's more important is, do people understand how they work best and what this work requires of them? And are they connected with a bigger why, a bigger sense of purpose, the organizational purpose or their own purpose, or ideally both aligning? And then they'll make a decision themselves. There's a company that I worked with, quite a small company, and they had a lovely saying. They called it martini culture. Anytime, any place, anywhere. And what they meant was you can work anytime, any place or anywhere to deliver on what you've been hired to deliver. That means also you can't work from home if your colleagues need you to be in for them to deliver. Maybe you don't work from the office, you work from your client's office because on that particular day, that's the place to be in order to do the best job you possibly can. So the question of where you sit comes from thinking about where is the best place to do the work, as opposed to, I like to work from home so I can wear my pajamas. It's not what it's about, that,
Interesting, really interesting to hear your perspective on that. And there's also been reports that some people, though, have come back to work after the pandemic and they're a little bit possibly they're scared of getting out there again, going into meetings, all the face-to-face interaction that's required in the business world. Suddenly they've lost their confidence. Have you experienced any of that?
Hugely. I mean, it happened to me as well. I felt very socially awkward when we started to see people in person again. I said all sorts of inappropriate things because I just sort of lost some of my muscle memory, I think. But yeah, what happens is, most people have heard of the comfort zone, right? So if you imagine the edges of the comfort zone become frightening. All the learning happens just outside the comfort zone, right? That's when we learn, that's when we grow, and we do things that are a little uncomfortable. But if you're in your comfort zone for too long, even the edges of the comfort zone become a bit scary. And so the comfort zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you are basically imprisoned in your comfort zone, and everything, including things that you used to be able to do, now is way outside. And so actually the only way to address that is to push at the edges, is to make ourselves just step outside a little bit, not way out into the panic zone, not necessarily going immediately back to things that we used to do that now terrify us. But how can we push at the edges? It might be turn your camera on a meeting. It might be go into the office on a day when you're not absolutely required to be there so you can connect with people in person. It might be give a presentation, which you used to do all the time and you haven't done it for a while. So Okay, start small, but do it. And in this way, we push out the comfort zone.
And visibility is so important now, isn't it? We're in an age of the personal brand and so on. And you're a very accomplished keynote speaker. But what advice have you got for people who are nervous of putting themselves out there? They might not even want to put their face on cameras or online. Would you say it's very difficult to grow a business if you don't do that?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I mean, it's not impossible. There are faceless businesses. I mean, we don't know who runs them, and they're not really about people, and we just buy the products or whatever. But I think that you're missing a trick if you don't. It's almost like we've got two ends of the spectrum as consumers. One is we want one click. We don't want any relationship with the business at all. We don't want there to be a human. And then the other end is it's all relationship. And we really want to feel that we know the personality of that business and they care about us. And if you're that kind of business, then you have to. What I would say is there are lots and lots of different ways that you can connect with people. And I would think about where are you naturally at your best? So for me, weirdly, I like a big audience. I'm the least comfortable with a group of about 10 to 20 people. I feel really exposed.
Yeah, same.
But when it's like 300 or 2,000 or whatever, there's no problem. And equally, I like one-to-one. So that's when I'm best. And so it works really well to be a coach and really well to be a keynote, because that's the two extremes. But smaller groups, I mean, I get over it and I do a lot of facilitation workshops and that kind of thing, but that tends to be less comfortable for me, and I've had to learn how to operate in that environment. So, if you don't want to make TikToks, don't make TikToks. But if you like taking photos, do Instagram. If you like writing longer form stuff, get on LinkedIn and get a newsletter. And, there's lots and lots of different ways to do it. It doesn't have to be the thing you dread.
Lots of different ways to show up.
Yeah.
And be visible, because that visibility is so important now, isn't it? And especially in a world of AI. Again, you talk about AI and what it's going to do for the future in your book. But there's a lot of kind of generic, bland content with AI. So authenticity, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but how important would you say it is to show your authentic self as a business person?
I think we really value that we have a lot of distrust in the sources of information, whether those are sort of newspapers or online content, or whether it's people, our leaders. And so we really, really are desperately thirsty for people that show up without a mask. Of course, it's still the professional version of you. We don't need to see everything. You don't need to reveal everything. But to be willing to connect with others, I think we really, really value that. And if you think about the leaders around the world at the moment that just make you feel like maybe things aren't quite so bad, they're very human. It's really refreshing. And so you could be that for somebody. You could reveal a little more about yourself. You could reveal that you're not perfect. And this is another thing that I would say to people. One of the privileges of being a coach is that people do reveal their messy insides to you. And I learned really early on, everybody is struggling with this self-doubt or with imposter syndrome or with thinking that other people don't look up to them or don't admire them or don't trust them or don't rate them. Everybody is struggling with that, apart from a few people on a sort of extreme end of a personality disorder. But most people, let's put it that way, I like that. And so when you feel like I don't think I can do it, or I don't believe I can do it, I just want to reassure you that the people that you're watching doing it, they also wake up in the morning with the same doubts.
Do you have any little techniques to help people overcome those doubts? I mean, like everybody, people will have days that are worse than others in that respect. But if you're having a bad day and thinking, I really don't feel like I can do this meeting, or I'm not feeling particularly confident, or do you have any tips or suggestions?
This is going to sound a bit controversial because I think how you feel is very important. And I think we should be connected with our feelings. But I also think that our feelings can betray us. Our feelings can keep us small. And so to be fully guided by how you're feeling on any particular day might mean that you never really do anything that is outside your comfort zone, because your feelings are basically trying to protect you. So, and equally our thoughts, we can do the same thing. You can think yourself out of doing something. So if we take going to the gym, for instance, you could wake up in the morning, and I mean, I know this from personal experience. You can wake up in the morning and think, I don't feel like going. I probably shouldn't go. I'm very tired. I should look after myself, right? So you don't go. Or you could say, I'm so busy. I've got so much to do. I really don't think I should go. I should really focus on my business. So you don't go. And in those instances, because I go to the gym quite frequently and I like it, what I've taught myself to do is stop thinking and stop feeling, just do.
Just go on.
You've already done the thinking and you've already done the feeling. When you decided to put it into the diary for today, that was you doing the thinking. And the feeling was you didn't feel good in yourself and you wanted to do something about it. So you've already had the feeling as well. So that's done. Now it's just a matter of get out of bed and go to the gym, stop thinking, stop feeling. So it sounds a bit counterintuitive, especially as I'm someone who spends a lot of time thinking and a lot of time helping people connect with their emotions. But sometimes it's not the time for thinking or feeling, just do.
You do a lot of work with female leaders as well, don't you, Blaire? I mean, what do you think are the main issues that you've encountered with women in leadership roles? Do you feel they doubt themselves more than male leaders? Do you feel they're a bit more reticent with public speaking? Have you noticed any particular patterns?
I think that we have a model of leadership which is very narrow, and a lot of people don't see themselves in that model. And that model is very male. It also excludes a lot of men who don't see themselves in that model. But of course, it excludes almost all women who don't see themselves that way. So I think that is pretty common, to think I can't lead, or I can't be that kind of leader, or I don't want to make those sorts of sacrifices and therefore I won't pursue leadership. I've also worked with a lot of men, and I know lots of those clients who have the same fears, the same negative inner dialogue. So I wouldn't say that's exclusive to women. One of the things that I have been looking into recently, and it's not my concept, but I was sort of exposed to it and I thought was really interesting, is just the percentage of time that women spend doing work that is called non-promotable. So in other words, work that doesn't help them get ahead, work that is overlooked. Things like making sure that the birthday card is signed for so-and-so whose birthday's coming, or organising the Christmas party, or making sure that the catering is good at this meeting that's coming up, even though it's not their job, even though they might even be very senior for getting involved in that. Taking notes in meetings, often women thinking, oh, is anyone I'll take notes. And it not only takes a huge amount of time, but is perceived as low value. Meanwhile, men are spending a higher proportion of their time on promotable work that is valued, work that moves a dial, that is seen to be serious and that gets them a promotion. And it's not that non-promotable work shouldn't be done. Some of it should be promotable because it's really important, and it should be shared around. But the fact that so many women are doing it actually dilutes the contribution that they can make, and also dilutes their sense of their own value.
Do you ever work with women who are working predominantly in male industries?
Almost exclusively,
Yes.
Because most industries are male dominated. Certainly in the commercial sector, right? So yeah, a lot of women in that situation. And I mean, there are so many shared experiences of the way they've been spoken to or spoken about, or the kind of feedback that they've been given. But what I have noticed is, particularly when I've been working with boards, for instance, and let's say there's a couple of women on the board and 7 or 8 men, it's often the women that will say the uncomfortable, hard truth. I think either because they already feel a bit excluded, so they're not trying to fit in because they're not going to, and they know that. Also because they needed to be pretty ballsy to get there, whereas maybe the men didn't need to be quite as ballsy to get there. But either way, I find those women incredibly brave. And if you want somebody to call out the sort of rubbish that's being talked about, it's very likely to be one of the women around the table.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. What would you say, Blaire, is the biggest mistake that leaders make in this day and age where we are now?
I think they think their value comes from solving problems and being right. And if they're not solving problems, and if they don't know what to do, they're not sure what their job is. And I don't think that is their job. Because I don't think that any one person can solve all the problems. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You can't possibly solve all the problems yourself. You can't have the right answers. Also, the times are so unprecedented, there really aren't any right answers. So you're better to sort of, put it out to some other people within the organisation and say, what do you think? And I don't think that we admire that anymore, somebody who claims to know everything, to know what they're doing. And some of the best
leaders, well, in my experience, the people I've worked with are the ones who know how to surround themselves with the best talent that can fill in for the bits that they maybe don't.
And then get out of the way. And the job of the leader being to get barriers out of the way. So what is in the way of all these amazing people that I've pulled together, so that's stopping them being able to do their work uninhibited? And then they make it their job to get those barriers out of the way. They get themselves out of the way because they're always a barrier as well, and kind of clear the path.
That's an interesting point as well about getting out of the way, because sometimes business owners are a bit possessive over their business. And do you find that's quite an issue with owners or leaders actually letting the workforce get on with what they do and stop micromanaging and let them get on with it?
For sure. And it is their baby, and they've got the business to a certain point, and they think that they have to make sure that everything is done exactly in duplication of the way that they would do it. But then they're missing out on the opportunities that those other people can bring, their ideas, their ways of solving problems, their observations about here's a new opportunity, or here's a new product that we could develop, or here's an untapped market, because they're so keen to control everything. So, I still think there's a job for leaders in sort of holding the ethos of the business. The businesses normally have an essence to them, especially if they have a founder who's still involved. And if that founder can articulate what that essence is and then kind of protect it and get other people to care about the ethos, that's kind of the biggest job they can do. And then people are working within that framework. So the way we do things around here. And as long as the goals are super clear, what this business is here to achieve, what it is we're really trying to do, and the ethos is clear, and so people know how we do things around here, people can be given a huge amount of freedom to solve problems themselves.
And obviously, letting other people take the load helps to avoid one of the massive issues of our time, which is burnout. I mean, you must have experienced a lot of leaders who've had this issue. Can you identify when someone's heading for burnout, and what are the signs?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a burnout specialist, but I have for sure seen a lot of burnout. And I think it comes from thinking that you are indispensable and that everything is urgent and everything is necessary. I think you can get into a bit of a spiral of thinking that everything has to be right all the time, and that you have to be right all the time. And this kind of perfectionist tendency about everything can be really dangerous. I think what we're seeing now is a move towards a recognition that recovery is really important, that there should be seasons to the business. Of course, times when you're working 24/7 to get something out the door, and other times when it's quieter. And that actually if the leader is really, really busy, then their people don't stand a chance. And I coached a guy very early on in my coaching life, He had his own business, and he couldn't understand why his staff were working such long hours, because he had said to them, go home. I'm the boss. Of course I'm going to do longer hours than you. This is my business, but you don't have to do the hours that I'm doing. And I pointed out to him that people in the business aren't going to go home before him because they don't want to be seen to be part-timers, right?
Absolutely.
So I said to him, why don't you hide around the corner, leave on time one day, leave at 5, right? And hide around the corner and see what happens. And of course, he left at 5, hid around the corner, and everyone fled the building about 5:05 when they knew he was gone. You
That's such an interesting story. I can totally see that. And I suppose, these leaders would just not even think that was the case. They wouldn't realize that how they're behaving, they're the role model. Everybody's looking to them for guidance on how they should behave.
Yes. And then you get the same thing. So you have to prioritize your well-being. You have to go home. You have to give yourself thinking time. You hire a coach. You do your self-development. The organization can only be as enlightened as you. So you're the limit on that.
Well, what do you think, Blaire, are the main opportunities for businesses now? What would you say are the exciting things that are really, really going to be exciting for businesses at this moment in time and over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think from a sort of people perspective, I think we're going to see a massive change in how people work. And not only will they have access to technology that is just going to really, really help them do their job, but it's also going to take away a huge amount of stuff that humans currently do that they will not be required to do, and that actually it's better if they don't do because it doesn't benefit from their humanity. And so that's going to allow us to think about, all right, what could humans do then? And the jobs could become much more interesting. So, and even entry-level jobs, rather than spending the day typing stuff into an Excel, even our entry-level people could be spending their days talking to our customers and clients, like human to human, because the big data gathering, we can get the technology to do, but that human connection, only humans can do. And I think we're going to see a massive revolution in the nature of work.
So how should we be preparing ourselves now?
We better do some self-development. We better become more emotionally intelligent, more self-aware. We better understand our values, what's important to us, what drives us. Even what's going to matter to us at the end of our careers or the end of our lives. I think it's really important that we sort of cast ahead sometimes and say, is at the end of it, am I going to think that this mattered, and get a bit of perspective? So that's first. We need to take care of ourselves, really, as whole, healthy people in mind and body. And then we need to create environments where other people can also come and work and be healthy in mind and body, so that they can do that creative work, they can connect, they're not burnt out, they want to go above and beyond, they're finding a sense of meaning and purpose from their work.
It's so interesting. I mean, so basically you're saying that humanity is going to be what's really valuable. Your humanity is going to be the real value going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And it'll be that interplay between your human and your non-human employees. We think about the tech as the non-human employees. What is the relationship between the two, and what do human beings stop doing that the tech can do? And also, what have we got tech doing that we should have humans doing?
Well, obviously kind of making connections and speaking is part of humanity. And because you're such an amazing public speaker, I just wanted to ask you for some tips on public speaking, because I feel that's going to be more and more important, presenting yourself. So if people haven't done much of it, what can they do to get better at public speaking, would you say?
Yeah. I think, and there's a lot really that can help. I think the first thing is to understand that the really great speakers that you see are using techniques. So it's not magic. I mean, there is some magic in it, but what you're mainly seeing is technique, and you can learn to do that. And so to dismiss it and say, I'll never be good at that, it's just a learnt skill. It's a science, I think, in large part. The other thing I think is really important is to still be yourself. I think we have this idea that, I have to be like this in order to, I have to be like Blaire, or I have to be like, somebody that I've seen on TV. And you can really be yourself, and you can speak from your heart. And as long as you're doing that, if you think, you wouldn't have trouble talking about this stuff at the pub with your friends, so you can talk about it in front of other people if you really believe in it. I think those things are important. And then, some techniques around nerves, pretty useful, and a few what we think of as sort of hard shoulder. So what will you do if it goes wrong? And deciding in advance. So for instance, I always have, I've been speaking for 15 years, but I still put on stage, when no one's looking, during the break or whatever, I put my prompt cards. And they're there on the lectern. I hardly ever even glance at them. I've often left them behind. I've completely forgotten that they were there. But I know if I have a complete blank, then I'll say, I'm sure there was one other thing that I wanted to say to you. Hang on a sec. And I'll look at my cards. No one is going to be horrified that I said, I'm sure there was one other thing. Hang on a sec, let me check. And if there wasn't, I'll say, no, that's it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
When you're walking into these venues, Blaire, because you speak at some huge venues, do you ever feel a little bit overwhelmed when you first walk in?
Yes, but what I've learnt is to treat it like it's my house. So this is another little mental trick. If I were walking in there unprepared, and it would be a different thing. But I know that I'm prepared. I've done the work. And then I think, all right, I'm just going to treat this like everybody here, the 3,000 people that are in this audience and all the backstage people, they're guests in my home. And I don't think anyone thinks it's weird when I go up to the sound engineers and I say, hi, how are you? How's it going today? You enjoying the event?
So you go into host mode?
I go into host mode because I'm very comfortable. And I can think, if I were inviting someone into my home, how would I be? And I can kind of channel that. So I talk to the sound guys as if, would you like it? Can I get you anything? Do you want coffee? Even though I'm the keynote and they're miking me up, I still treat it in that way. And it's not an act. It's just, this is going to make me feel more comfortable. It's going to be lovely. Can you imagine? The keynote arrives and asks the sound engineer, can I get you something?
Yeah,
sound engineer's going to do a brilliant job for you because
yeah,
you were so lovely to them.
And it gets you just in the right vibration, as it were, doesn't it? It sets the tone straight away.
And you end up feeling like it's your home. So it's really good for you because now you're just at home. I always walk the stage before I speak, and that's another reason why I do it. I want to stand on that stage and I want to look out at where people will be. And so the first time I get on the stage isn't the first time I've seen the room from that perspective, just to make myself feel more at home.
Well, Blaire, it's been really fascinating talking to you, but you've had such an amazing career so far. You've been a TV journalist, you've a coach to global organisations, you've written 4 books as well. What else would you like to achieve? Is there anything else you would like to achieve?
Yes, it's funny you should mention that. So I said I really like the gym, and this is ironic because at school I was the last person. I mean, I was terrible at PE, absolutely the worst.
At PE as well.
Yeah, I was the last to be picked. All of that, hated it. But this summer I'm going to start training as a personal trainer.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the reason for that is, partly to enhance my own understanding of body mechanics and all of that. I work with a PT. I'll never be able to replace him in terms of knowledge, but having some of my own be really useful. But I also want to bring some of the learning that I get from that and from starting to work with some people in the gym into my work around leadership. Because as I said before, we're whole humans. We're not just a sort of machine carrying our brain around, and we really do neglect our body, our nutrition, our strength, our sleep, all of these sorts of things. And if I can approach leadership with my clients from a holistic perspective, and they can think about how their health impacts their performance, how their health impacts the health of the people in their organization because of their expectations or because of what's perceived as normal, then it's another way that we can make work better for everybody and bring out the best in our people.
Sounds amazing. And the mind and body is so closely connected. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. Blaire, where can people reach you? You're on LinkedIn.
Yes, LinkedIn is my favourite. Yeah, so I really would love people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I know some people are really against it, but I love it.
Well, we've got your details in the description and also the link to your book and everything, so people can find it there. But thank you so much. It's been so interesting and so much value in our conversation. Thank you so much, Blaire.
Thanks.
Have you worked hard to achieve success in your field? Do you think you'd be a great guest on Success Means Business? Could you inspire others and help to teach them how to make the very best of their life, their goals, their profession? If so, get in touch. We are looking for guests on Success Means Business all the time, and we would love to talk to you. Success Means Business is brought to you by Applehead Media.